What if the person you're trying to fix isn't actually broken? And what if you don't understand why you do the things that you do? My guest today, Ian Cron, he is a psychotherapist. He's a priest and a best-selling author of The Road Back to You. He is one of the world's leading experts on the Enneagram. But if you ever wondered why you push yourself so hard, why you can't give yourself any rest, or why your strengths sometimes work against you, this episode will stop you in your tracks. You will absolutely love today's podcast. You're probably going to love Ian. Go grab his book. But here's what I'll tell you. Get a notebook, because this isn't about doing more. It's about finally understanding who you are and why you do what you do. So, gents, let's just dive in. Hey, what's going on, Ian? Welcome to Dad Edge, my friend. It's good to have you here.
Thank you, Larry. It's good to be here.
So let's start here. Let's just start with your background and how you even got involved in this work. So let us know about your background.
Yeah. Well, I have been married for 40 years, and I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I have 3 children, two girls and a boy. I was first introduced to the Enneagram when I was in graduate school studying to become a psychotherapist. And when I discovered it, I was like, after a year of, coursework, and I was like, gosh, where has this been? This is like really great, actionable, accessible, interesting, and uncannily accurate descriptions of different kinds of personality styles. And then I went on, I did another master's in divinity, became an Episcopal priest, trained spiritual director, and then an author and speaker and coach. So I've had a portfolio life with lots of different hats, but all of them are sort of in service to the same thing, which is helping people understand, who they are, their way of being and showing up for life, and helping them to become the best expressions of themselves.
Interesting. So tell me about the calling for the priesthood. That sounds really fascinating.
Well, I was raised Roman Catholic, and I went to Catholic schools, and that was not a great experience. But church and the Mass and sort of a more liturgical life was something that really drew me, even as a little kid. And as I grew older, I just felt called very powerfully back to that kind of spiritual formation and practice in both church and life. And I've never looked back. I love it. I don't have a parish. I don't I sort of volunteer at a chapel at Vanderbilt University, but it's very much a part of my identity and my life.
And then so did you go to seminary and everything?
Oh, yeah.
How long were you there for?
For 3 years.
Okay.
And then 2 years for my psychotherapy degree. And then went on and did several years of doctoral work at Fordham University in New York.
Wow. And then how did you get into the Enneagram?
Well, like I said, I discovered it when I was in graduate school, quite by accident. And it wasn't maybe for another 10 years, 20 years after I went to graduate school that I revisited the Enneagram as a tool that I thought, in part because I just always heard people talking about it. And I was like, And by that point, I'd already had a couple of books out. And I was like, wow, a lot of people talk about this, but there's not a current book out there that helps people understand it at the level of a primer, like an introduction to the Enneagram. And hence then I wrote The Road Back to You.
I love it. And so take us through the Enneagram as far as what all of them mean.
Yeah. Well, here's what the Enneagram is for people who don't know, right? The Enneagram is a personality typing system, and it teaches that there are 9 basic personality styles in the world, one of which we gravitate toward and adopt in childhood as a way to cope, to feel safe, and to navigate the new world of relationships in which we find ourselves, right? There are 9 types, and each one has a unconscious motivation that powerfully influences how that type acts, thinks, and feels from moment to moment on a daily basis.
So talk to me about each one of the nine then, and like how they do that.
Sure. So to be clear, like I could write a 200-page book on each of these types. So I'm just going to give you like a sentence or two because we don't have time to go through them in that kind of detail. Type ones are called the improvers. They're ethical, they're meticulous, they're detail oriented, they're morally heroic people, right? They're motivated by a need to perfect themselves, others, and the world. They used to be called the perfectionists, but I got too many emails from perfectionists who were like, why is our name so negative? And I'm like, well, actually, improver is a better word for you, so I changed it. Type twos are called the helpers, warm, caring, and giving. They're motivated by a need to meet the needs of other people, and to be appreciated. It's a big idea for twos. Threes are called the performers. Sometimes they're called the achievers. They're success oriented, image conscious, driven, ambitious, wired for productivity, and they're motivated by a need to succeed, to appear successful, and to avoid failure at all costs. When you get to the fours, the romantics, creative, sensitive, moody, disproportionately represented in the creative arts or fields. They're motivated by a need to be special and unique, to compensate for a perceived missing piece in their essential makeup. Fives, they're the investigators, analytical, detached, moody, sometimes emotionally unavailable. They're motivated by a need to gain knowledge, to conserve energy, and to be self-sufficient and independent. Autonomy is a big theme for fives. Sixes, the loyalists, committed, practical, witty. We think there are more sixes in the population than there are any other type. They are worst case scenario thinkers who are motivated by fear and a need for safety, security, and support. Sevens, the enthusiasts, the joy bombs of the Enneagram, fun, spontaneous, adventurous. They're motivated by a need to experience pleasant feelings and thoughts, right? They're motivated and they do this by planning stimulating experiences, and really all of this is in service to avoiding emotional pain. Eights, the challengers, commanding, intense, larger than life people, confrontational when they're not very healthy. They're motivated by a need to assert strength and power over others in the environment in order to mask tenderness and vulnerability. And type nines, the peacemakers, are pleasant, laid back, accommodating, don't upset the apple cart. They're motivated by a need to maintain internal and external harmony and avoiding conflict.
Are these thank you for that. That definitely explains a lot. Are these things that we're born with, or are they all environmental as we get older?
Yeah, this is a long standing debate in psychology, right? Some people will say it's nature and some people will say it's nurture, right? I say it's both, right? Like first of all, there's no MRI that we can take to figure out where they came from, right? But I think there's, it's a mix of both nurture and nature. And in what proportions, I don't know. I don't know if it's 50-50. It might be 50-50 for you. It might be 28, 72 for me, whatever. It's like, I think that remains a mystery.
Are there certain personality types that you've seen that more men and dads are versus like maybe the rest of the population? No,
No,
not okay.
no, absolutely not. These are fairly gender neutral, right?
Okay.
Like, now there are cultural stereotypes that men should be certain things and not certain things, right? And that would change from, for example, if I were to go to Mexico or Asia, right? Like culture would value different personality traits more than other cultures might. So it's a little bit contextual.
Got it. Okay. And then what have you seen the advantages are when people understand what their Enneagram is?
Well, it's really kind of uh, profound. You know, for thousands of years, great thinkers, spiritual sages, and others have all said that understanding who you are and your internal world, how it works, how you process life, why you do the things that you do, is absolutely essential to good living. It's just absolutely essential. Uh, when you meet people who are low on the self-awareness scale, chances are you don't enjoy that conversation, right? Like people who don't understand themselves or know themselves they're on autopilot and they just tend to bang around guardrail to guardrail in relationships, right? They're just not very grounded people. And so, I think it's particularly useful as a parent to understand your personality type, those of your children, if that's possible, um, because it gives you a picture of what's going on inside of yourself and others so that you can better, in the case of yourself, monitor and regulate and better self-lead yourself. So you can monitor and regulate your behaviors, bring to the fore those which are best about you, and, keep your eye on the ones that aren't best about you so that you don't cross lines into things that are unhelpful and unskillful in relationships. I mean, it's interesting. Most of my business life is spent working with major corporations, CEOs, senior leadership teams that call me in to help them and their teams understand who they are, right? So that they can work together more efficiently, more happily, with more harmony and more effectiveness. And the same is true in the home, right? Like I just want to understand where my kids are coming from, especially if they don't share a type with me, right? Because they're motivated by very different things, so it's tremendously, tremendously helpful in terms of just being wise as a parent.
We are talking today about self-awareness and the understanding of inner worlds of our kids. And there is one place our kids struggle that we often don't see, and that is online. You guys know I use Bark for my boys. Bark is a tool that helps me stay ahead of the chaos, ahead of the anxiety, and the stuff our kids run into on their phones that they usually want to hide or minimize. It monitors text messages, it monitors social media, YouTube, group chats, and even gaming apps. And it will alert you when something is seriously wrong, so you don't have to snoop, you don't have to micromanage, you just have to be aware and get Bark. If you want your parenting to be proactive instead of reactive, let me tell you guys, Bark is a game changer, an absolute game changer. I have had more fruitful conversations with my kids in the past 7 years since I've been using Bark than I would have ever had. I've also got in front of a lot of issues that could have turned into absolute chaos if I had not got in front of it. Guys, Bark is super cheap. It's like $15 a month. And I got to tell you, I would pay $100 a month for this service. If you guys go to thedadedge.com/bark, you can try Bark 7 days for free. And if you like it, you'll save 10% for life. They now have the Bark watch for the little guys. My 9-year-old has that. They now have the Bark phone, which my 12-year-old has that. It's awesome. And if you don't want to use any of those, they've got the app. And guys, what I'll tell you, it is a game changer. Like I said, head on over to thedadedge.com/bark. Let's keep our kids safe. All right, back to my show with Ian. Yeah, I think it's if we understand ourselves better, we're probably going to be able to understand, obviously, our cues to the world and how we perceive things, how we process things, and all of that good stuff.
Yeah.
Where have you found that this has been really helpful in marriage? Really curious about that one.
Same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, like I want to understand my wife, right? So my wife is an Enneagram 9. She's an easygoing person, low maintenance, doesn't want to upset the apple cart, doesn't like conflict, historically. And she sometimes doesn't assert very strongly her opinions, her viewpoints, her perspectives, right? So when I learned the Enneagram and I learned my wife was at 9, it really changed everything in our marriage because suddenly I was able to say to her, honey, I bet you have a stronger opinion on that than you're voicing. And I think it's really important for you to say what is on your heart. And, and she was like pie-eyed at first. It was like, what? Like we're changing the rules here. And when she learned her type, then she started to work on herself. I started to work on myself, right? Because one of the things the Enneagram reveals is that what's best about you is what's worst about you, and what's worst about you is what's best about you. So it actually gives you some paths or suggested things to do to really grow up and be your best self, right? So, and it gave us a language in marriage to talk about what was going on inside, so that it wasn't, when we were getting around issues that were hard, it wasn't as personal, right? It was more like, hey, you're a 9. This is typically how you see things. Oh, Ian, you're a 4. This is how you typically see things. This is why maybe you're reacting more emotionally than I am to this situation. And so it just gives you an incredible amount of data to begin to work with as you do relationships with people. It gives you empathy. It gives you compassion. It gives you understanding. What the ways that the other person suffers sometimes, and how to help them. So, I've seen the Enneagram save marriages. I've also seen it in terms of parenting, being a dad. I've seen it heal broken relationships between dads and moms and their children, in really traumatic ways.
I bet you have. Yeah, thanks for that. Have you mentioned that the Enneagram kind of gives you the best and the worst of yourself, right? I'd love for you to just share an example of maybe even something from your score personally that was sort of that yin and yang that really hit that point home.
Yeah, well, let's talk about you. That's more interesting. What's your type?
I'm a 3, wing 2.
Okay. And so, how many kids do you have?
I have 4 boys.
How old are they?
19, 17, 12, and 9.
All right. So, in your case, you are motivated by a need to succeed, to appear successful, and to avoid failure at all costs. Chances are you have workaholic tendencies. You can't stop doing. You are a doer. You hate inefficiencies. You don't like too many feelings in the environment because they slow you down. You got to start like dealing with people's inner worlds, right? Okay, you're laughing already. By the way, see now, Larry, I just met you 10 minutes ago. The fact that I know you're a 3, I know things about you that if I didn't know the Enneagram would take me maybe years to learn about you. I just know that now within 7 minutes of knowing you. And I could go on about 3s, right? I know that you probably struggle at times with imposter syndrome, the feeling that, I don't quite know who I am, so I'm going to create this persona that wins people over. You really want to be admired by other people. You want other people to look at you and be impressed, probably. You probably, in your relationship with your children, for example, and I don't know what types your boys are, but you're a guy that is always looking at the goal line and trying to figure out how to score. And you're always rushing for the goal line and trying to find the fastest way to cross it and win. The problem is that sometimes you run through people en route, that you can be sort of insensitive. Like you're just so focused on the goal that you don't realize, oh, I haven't paid very much attention to my boys today because I've been taking 25 phone calls and I've been working. And I'm not in touch with my kids. Now I can go on and on, but you see right away, like, oh, if I know my type, I know where my blind spots are and the things that I have to work on to prevent them from overtaking me and negatively affecting my relationships with my kids. If you have kids who are more feeling-based kids, you may be very impatient with them. You may say, I don't understand you. The danger for dads oftentimes is they think their job is to make their kids a carbon copy or a facsimile of themselves. That is not a good way to parent, right? The goal is to help your kid to become who they are, right? Not just a copy of you. You may have kids that are more withdrawing types. You're a very assertive type. And you may not understand them, and you may think, I'm failing because my kid's not assertive. But your kid may not be fundamentally an asserting type, right? They may be much more laid back, not as organized. Their attention may be a lot different than yours. You have a very laser focused attention. Other types have what we call a diffuse attention, right? And you'll be like, I'm impatient because they seem spacey and not on their game and not focused enough. And it's like, you're actually making the mistake sometimes as a parent in those situations of assuming that your way of seeing the world is normal. And if your kids aren't following your way, they're abnormal, right? Well, what if there's more than just your way of seeing and being in the world? And that's actually true. Even if you don't like the Enneagram, different people interact with the world in different ways. And though your kids may confound you at times, you have to figure out who they are and parent to that, not to trying to make them who you are because you think that's normal.
That makes total sense. So is there anything like good about me, or do I just suck all around?
Oh, no. Well, here's the thing. If you want flattery, don't play with the Enneagram.
Just mess with
No, but it's true. If you want flattery, you can take Strength Finders, right? Or DISC, which, by the way, I would encourage you to do. There's amazing things about the Enneagram 3s, but every type has a shadow side, and it's much easier for you to identify with your type if I tell you some things that you're not getting done well versus all the things you are doing well. Like a dad who's a 3 who is healthy, meaning think of the personality on a continuum from unhealthy to healthy, right? Like there's a healthy 3 and there are unhealthy 3s. There's a highly self-aware 3 type and there's a very low self-awareness. And that's up to you to do the work to get as high as you can. And so, I was describing 3s that aren't particularly healthy, right? But when they're doing great, they are inspiring, worthy of our admiration. They get stuff done. They're focused. They're energetic. They're charismatic. They're inspiring. They are willing to talk about failures that they've had in order to help others become more successful. They're less interested in flaunting their success to impress others, and they're more interested in helping other people be a success and they're willing to not drive the bus for once. They're willing to be just another passenger on the bus with everybody else in life. They relax, they become human beings rather than human doings. And, on and on and on. So when they're healthy, they're great, but every type can be unhealthy or healthy. And, our job is to learn what makes for our type to be healthy and to pursue that with all we have.
And then just so we know, like, how is this, you've had your kids take this test.
Yes.
As well, which is really giving you a window to a world that probably most parents don't get to see.
Al, absolutely. My kids, people think that because I've written books about the Enneagram, that's what we all talk about all day long, but that's not true. We don't. We talk about so many other things. The Enneagram comes up periodically, but it's not something like we are just like frothing at the mouth talking about it all the time. It's a useful tool, right? That's it, right? There's lots of useful tools. This just happens to be one of them that we tend to prefer and like to use. My kids are very different from me. It has given me insights into them that have really helped me customize and my parenting differently for each of those 3 kids, and to help them grow in terms of self-awareness and, being the best version of themselves. So, and to help them figure out how to steward the personality that they've been given.
I love that. And what age would you suggest kids even taking this?
I would wait until adolescence. And generally speaking, unless you have a kid that's really curious and wants to know, like you had a 14-year-old who's like, I really want to know. Well, then let them take the test or read a book. Read my book would be a good one for them because it's not highly clinical or anything. It's pretty story-oriented and kind of fun to read. But we think the nuts and bolts of personality are kind of in place around the age of 5, but it's not. It's still wet cement, right? And adolescents are always trying on new identities, right? New, like one day your kid thinks they're a rock star, next day they want to be like, captain of the football team. Who knows, right? Like they're trying things out. So I say, 16, 17, 18, I think is probably a good time to do it. And it's super helpful. Like it is so helpful parenting. It's a little kooky.
It sounds like it is. And then, going back to like why parents should probably just understand theirs, like, so the way that you described me was accurate to a T, like, I mean, like all of those things, like I just can't, I don't sit still, constantly moving to the next thing, like when as soon as I create one thing, I just want to create the next thing and like it, but yeah, um, the awareness of all of that, you're right. So like, I mean, I just turned 50 in July and, I think in your late 40s and mid 40s, and I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, but like, I don't know. I just think that that's like a time in life where you do a lot of introspection and you start to like maybe look at life just a little bit differently. And all those things that you talked about, I'm like, yeah, I'm insanely aware of that stuff. And like a lot of the times I have to like really dial myself back, when it comes to, especially if I'm working on something that, I'm really passionate about, or like, man, we really need to go in this direction. And, yeah, I need to sometimes stop and smell the roses and make sure people are okay who are on that boat, but I want to go back to this area that you were talking about, which is, there's good things about it. And there's also shadow work, that can work against you. And, how do people start to go down that path of like, okay, there's some not so good things about this personality type, and I need to learn about that. What is the best start to learn about some of the things that aren't so great about these?
Well, there's a bunch of really good books on the Enneagram and resources. And so just beginning to, you could start with a test, but I always tell people tests are super useful, but they're only one data point. So once you learn your type, you really have to confirm it because, tests have margins of error. They just do, right? No matter, doesn't really matter. You want to get a test that is, highly reliable. And there's a ton of ones that out there on the market that are not. I can just tell you because they're not created by research psychologists and they're not accurate, right? But you get a book like my book, The Road Back to You, and you just start to read up on your type, right? And you just start to learn because it's all in there. Like what are some of the blind spots? What are some of the things that are really good about my type? And in the book, it also talks about like what are some of the transformational tasks that each type has to do. And, like I mentioned for threes, moving from being a human doing to a human being, that's what's happening to you right now. Right. So in the literature that talks about first half of life and second half of life, right? As you now are in the second half of life, I would be very worried if you weren't introspective. If you were still out there trying to crush it and prove yourself, I'd be like, dude, you're a little past that. Like you should be a little past that now. Like your gaze should be less focused on achievement and acquiring things, degrees, business wins, all the stuff in first half, all the stuff you do in the first half of life. In the second half of life, the gaze sort of turns more inward and you start to think about things like forgiveness, about ending well, about giving your life away instead of trying to consume life. Now you're going to try and give it back to people at this stage, right? And you're kind of at the beginning stage of that. But yeah, you turn a corner and now the agenda and the tasks ahead of you are just very different than they were in the first half.
Do our Enneagrams, do they change over time? So could I have a different, score or a different personality type at the age of 30 than I do at like 50?
Well, traditionally in the Enneagram world, the answer to that question is no. Once your type is in place, it's your type. That said, you evolve in your type. So your type doesn't change, but you will grow and evolve within it, right? So I will tell you that I'm 65 years old, and who I was at 25 versus 65, I was definitely a 4 at 25. I am definitely a 4 at 65, but I am older, wiser, a little bit more, I got more miles on these tires than I did. And I've done enough work on myself that there are pitfalls and blind spots that have been illuminated for me, and I've become more practiced at working to prevent them from taking the wheel and, you know, having repeated car crashes with them.
So you said you're a 4, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you're a 4, which is a 4 is the individualist.
Some are sometimes called the individualist, sometimes called the romantic.
Okay, so the individualist to the romantic. So what, just out of curiosity, when did you find this out? You were quite a bit younger?
32 years old.
32. And as an individualist, like you probably learned, the good things about this personality and then the things that maybe were hard to hear. What were some of the things that were hard to hear or that's difficult about your personality? And then I would love to know, how have you created more awareness and evolved into this personality type that is probably, it's more of a benefit to you than maybe some of the things that were shadows that were maybe not benefits.
Yeah, great question. Well, so I'm a writer, I'm an artist, right? And I was a songwriter at one time. So that's another piece of my autobiography. That's why I live in Nashville. So I'm very much a guy who's interested in writing and the arts and things like that. Enneagram 4s can be overly attuned to their own feelings. They can become self-absorbed, self-interested. They begin to think that their story of suffering is worse than other people's stories. Now that can create great songs, right? Right? You can write great songs out of that. Radiohead "Creep." I mean, you know what I mean? You can write great songs out of it, and you also can become melancholy and too interested in your inner world to the exclusion of that of others. I didn't enjoy learning that I'm one of the more shame-based types on the Enneagram. There's a lot of shame for 4s. It was hard for me to learn that I needed to own the fact that my life was more ordinary than I wanted it to be. You know what I mean? Like, there's just a ton of stuff. This is what I appreciate most about the Enneagram, right? It's like, it it doesn't just tell you what you're getting right. It does do that, but it's also going to begin. When you first learn your Enneagram type, chances are you won't be very happy about it. You're going to feel exposed, like somebody like flashed a light inside of you and said, "Oh, there you are," and you're going to go, "Ouch, boy, that's not great." In fact, when people tell me I hated my number when I first heard it, I'm like, "Good, chances are that's your number then." And so, because we had to deal with the honest facts, right? Like, there's no growth until you face honestly what's there. And you can't let go of parts of yourself that you need to let go of unless you first identify them and say, "Oh, I've been holding on to these." And, for me to grow up and become a real adult, I need to learn how to steward these well, in my life. So I'll give you an example of this. Part of this is age. Part of it is also just work. 4s typically have lots of feelings. They typically have more feelings in an hour than you have in a week, right? And they're just and they like big emotions, okay? So when I was younger, my emotions would do this, right? Up and down, up and down. Now they go like this, right? I have more equanimity, meaning I don't get as thrown off by life as I did as a younger man, right? And I've learned to harness my emotional intelligence, which is pretty high as a 4, for good purposes, and to turn it in good directions and service to other people, rather than being kind of a neurotic basket case like I was at 25, like just all over the map. Um, yeah, so I now know that my emotional attunement to other people is wonderful for me as a dad. Like I am emotionally attuned to my kids. At the same time, I had to learn how to use that attunement well and use it for good purposes. Like one of the great gifts of fours is empathy. I'm very good with empathy. If you started this thing off before you hit record by sharing with me deep things about your life, I wouldn't blink. I wouldn't think to myself, oh, okay, this is kind of strange. I don't know this guy and he's sharing deep stuff with me. I'd be like, yeah, this is what people do with me. And I would actually be very empathic. You could tell me about all kinds of mistakes you're making, all kinds of problems you're having. And I'd be like, oh, dude, that sounds really hard. And I also wouldn't feel compelled to fix you. I would just be a good presence, like listening to you. That's a natural gift that I have. Now, by the way, this is also something great. When you know your and your partner's like Enneagram types, sometimes my kids will come to me and go, oh, that sounds like a mom question. And sometimes my kids will come to their mom with something they're really struggling with. And they go, that's a dad question. And because we just know who's got the stronger gifts in these different domains. If my kids are really hurting, go to dad, right? If you need something more practical, go to mom. Like she's much more practical than I am. I'm much more up in the world of words and books and, music and songwriting and feelings and being a therapist. I mean, it's like, it's the division of labor gets a lot easier when you know what your Enneagram type is.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, it's just like each person has their gifts, their strengths, and that's where you could go. Yeah.
It doesn't mean I can't be practical. It just I have to burn more calories to be practical.
Right, burn more calories. Yeah, yeah.
My wife would have to burn more calories to be empathic. And so we also are calling each other to grow in certain areas of life that are not natural to us, but we know it's not natural, so we're able to extend grace to each other because, guess what? I can't just get up every day and like start writing songs. I got to get up and also make the bed and show up for life and do practical things. And my wife has to remind me sometimes, yeah, you might want to do some practical things around here, and I sometimes need to help her work on things that I do well.
This is a really odd question, but the curiosity is getting the best of me. But are there any of these personality types that like they're like oil and water? It's like, oh man, like Peacemaker and the Challenger, like there's no way in the world that they would have a good relationship.
No, I've seen two types of any combination work out great, as long as both of them are working hard at either in counseling or through reading or through reflection at really overcoming the wounds in their lives that are preventing them from being whole. And so as long as both are equally committed to growing and changing and doing whatever and doing that work rigorously and doing it honestly, they'll do great. If you have one person who's growing, and I've seen this a million times, one person that's really has had an awakening. Oh, I'm a 5 or I'm a 6, or, they're discovering new things about themselves and their past and trying to become healthier. That person's up here, and you got another person, and it's often the guy, though not always, but that's often the case, right? Who's like, I don't really want to do that touchy-feely stuff. Right. Which actually is usually just resistance and cowardice, honestly. And they're like, I don't feel like changing. I like, and suddenly, so when that happens and the other person doesn't want to come on the journey of transformation, this distance between the two gets greater and greater. And if you can imagine a rubber band between the two of them, eventually it's going to break. One person's going to say, I outgrew this relationship. I outgrew this marriage. Mm-hmm. Because the other one just refused to change or do the work. That's when a marriage starts to go sideways.
So it's people that obviously they have their different personalities, but it's how well am I going to get to know myself so I understand this so I can bring my best self to you?
Yes, and by the way, the research is actually pretty compelling that people, here's the problem with dating apps, the algorithms are set up in such a way that it tries to find people who match you. Okay? So politically match you, socially match you, right? Like to find someone just like you. But the research is really clear that what makes a relationship sticky and interesting is difference, not similarity. You should not be looking for someone similar to you to have a relationship. Like a relationship is often most interesting and lifelong when you have really two very different kinds of people, and they've learned to do life together, and they are consistently and perpetually surprised about how the other one is doing life, and they are for each other, in whatever personality style they have, becoming the best version of that. And so really it's really about the word that sometimes is used, and it's not actually a word, but that, psychology does that. You want to find someone who's a companionability. Compatibility is oversold. Difference is what makes relationships interesting and for the long term.
Interesting. But is it, I definitely understand like having like my wife and I were totally different personalities. And
what's her type? Do you know her Enneagram type?
I don't know her Enneagram. She's never taken it, but I do know that she's introverted. I'm extroverted. And our personalities are different, but they mesh really well. But we have common interests that we like to do together. So like while our personalities are totally night and day, our interests are very similar. So like we both love to exercise. We both love to hike. We both love the simple things like a good cup of coffee and a conversation is all we really need, that kind of thing. But yeah, definitely our personalities are different, but the things that we like to do are, do you find that couples need to have common ground, or is that
yes, I do think that's really important, right? That particularly when it comes to values, that you have similar, if not the same kinds of values.
Makes sense.
If you don't, that's going to cause some serious friction in a relationship, right? I think common interests is wonderful. I also think having different interests is really important, right? It has to be a both and in that situation, because, my wife has interest in things I have no interest in, but she brings home all of her enthusiasm about them. And I'm like, that's fascinating. Tell me more, because I don't have any interest in that. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, it's just part of celebrating the difference and the diversity of ideas and experiences. The problem with being married to someone who's just like you is that you'll end up living an unconfronted life. Meaning, look, if you were married to another three, you would actually co-sign the BS about the dark side of your personality in them. You'd be like, oh, you're as ambitious, multitasking, and not you know what I'm saying? Like you would just tell each other that's fine to keep doing that. So you'd be mutually reinforcing the darker aspects of your type.
My gosh, my wife and I definitely have to be different, because she's always like I'll be like, oh, like I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this thing. She's like, oh, well, yeah. Did the last thing not do it for you? Like, you got to just go do something else.
Yeah. Well, that's called, okay. So that's what I mean by that. Yeah. The benefit of that is you're living a confronted life. Your wife is confronting you about things in your personality that are overcharged.
So true.
And that you're over focused on. And that's a gift, right? Yeah, if she was another three, she'd be like, keep going.
Yeah.
Right. And
disastrous.
That could be disastrous. Yeah.
Let me ask you this, I don't know if you've ever been asked a question like this, but
oh, you'd be surprised. Chances are.
Probably you have. But like, I got to be honest with you, Ian. So like, when I first took the Enneagram and everything you told me, like, I think I took it, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and everything that you told me pretty much I heard then. I was like, oh, yeah, that's painfully true. Yes, it is, right? But the way that I've done this or like navigated through this is like all the shadow problems that the achiever has. Like, I almost look at him like he's separate from me. Like, I almost have to like talk him down. Be like, in a way that's almost like, like I could just... so I just got done launching a book, right? And then my wife asked me, she's like, "So, are you gonna like take a break, or are you gonna like go do something else now?" And I'm like, "No, I'm gonna like take a break, and I'm gonna enjoy this right now." And of course, like I just came up with a new idea. I'm launching a new course called Roommates to Soulmates, and that's gonna launch in January. And I'm sitting there thinking like, and I kind of like talk to this guy who's like this achiever. I'm like, dude, can you just like calm down? Like, just give me a second here. Like, I'm just like trying to enjoy this. Like, no, you got work to do. It's almost like this conversation that happens sometimes between me and this like achiever. Do people do that with their Enneagrams?
Well, of course, that's called self-awareness.
Okay.
That's called you monitoring and self-regulating. That's called good self-leadership.
Okay.
It's knowing that that's a dark side of your personality and that it has to be managed versus it managing you. That's
That
the
makes
problem is most people have personalities that are managing them, right? You should be at the helm, right? Your authentic true self should be at the helm. And when it's not, you're going to run into problems.
that makes sense. Do is that how people sometimes view this whole thing though? Is like, there's me and then there's my personality that I have to manage. Does that make sense? It's
Yeah.
almost like there's two people in the front.
Yeah. Well, if you, okay, now you're getting into some deep waters here. So,
Yeah,
um, okay. You know how you always are saying things like, part of me wants to go to the gym today and part of me wants to watch Netflix and eat a sleeve of donuts, right? Like people talk all the time about having parts,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that's because when you think about your internal world, it may be helpful to think of it not as a unitary thing, but really a collection of subpersonalities or parts. So you have an achiever part, but you also have, chances are you have, do you have a strong inner critic?
Oh yeah.
Okay, that's another part.
Totally.
So we just have lots of different parts. Some of those parts are in conflict with each other, right? They want different things. Like think of each part as having its own personality, its own temperament, its own beliefs, its own desires, right? It's like, and I think part of the job of becoming a mentally and healthy and spiritually healthy person is to make contact and to strengthen that core inner true self that then can lead all those different parts well. So when your little achiever starts going, we got to do more, people aren't going to pay attention to us. We're going to be irrelevant. We got to work harder. We still have some stuff to crush here. Like when we start talking about, well, who is it that's watching that person? Well, that's your authentic self, right? Your essential self. It should just be able to look at that part of you and go, so tell me what's going on. You should learn about your parts. You should learn from them, like figure out what they believe. Like that achiever part of you, it believes that people only value you for what you do and accomplish versus who you are.
There's a lot of truth to that. A ton of truth. I mean, can I tell you something just super authentic, like really deep?
Sure.
There's like this belief in me that, and here's the funny thing, like I know deep down that this is not true, but I have this belief that if I financially could not provide for my family, I would become worthless to them. Like,
So it's,
there's a
yeah.
part of me that believes that, even though there's another part. Here's what we're talking about parts. There's another part of me that doesn't believe that whatsoever. But there's a deep seated fear in me that if I could not provide for my family, like, what use am I?
Yes. Now, um, you want to do something really vulnerable?
Yeah, be great.
Okay. Uh, Close your eyes.
Okay.
And I want you to tell me just where does that part live in your body? That achiever part of you that believes that if you can't provide for your family, then you're worthless to them.
I feel it like right here.
Okay. Put your hand right there. Okay. And now, can you can you actually kind of visualize that part inside of you?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. What is it? What does it look like?
A ball,
Okay. What color is it?
red,
Is it hot, cold? What is it?
hot.
Okay. Um, can you just take a moment and ask that part of you if it would be willing to have a brief conversation with you for a moment? And let me know what it says.
Okay. Yeah, but it just feels heavy.
Mm-hmm. What does that mean, heavy? What is that feeling?
Like almost like I don't want to cooperate.
Hmm. Okay. Can you ask it what its job is in your life?
Sure. It basically said to keep me going in the right direction.
Okay. And can you ask it what is afraid will happen if it stops doing its job in your life?
I will lose momentum. I'll lose traction. My life will become out of control.
And then what would happen?
I would lose a lot of things.
Hmm. Okay. Here's an interesting question. Ask that part of you how old it is.
Just the age 12 keeps coming up.
Okay, great. And now here's an interesting question, right? Ask that part how old it thinks you are.
The just the answer that comes back is the same age.
Hmm. Okay, so what I'd like you to do now is um, tell that part that you would like to continue this conversation with it and ask it if that would be okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So now open your eyes and tell me honestly what you're feeling right now.
Uh, just a lot of heaviness, really. The thing that I'm thinking of is so my biological father left when I was very little, like one. Never knew him. He came back into my life when I was 12, and we had a relationship for about 6 months, and then he left again, and that was the end of our relationship until I was 30. Um, I guess that's what's coming up for me is that that same age that was there was the same age that happened.
Hmm. So what we just did was actually very profound and more profound than I thought it would be, actually. So,
I definitely feel something. I just don't know what it is, to be honest.
which is common for threes. Threes have the heart. Threes have lots of feelings. They just don't know how to name them. Like they don't, the feelings both, they have tons of feelings and they're also kind of averse to having feelings because feelings slow you down and you can't get as much done if you're dealing with feelings. Right. So, I mean, just in a second, we accessed a part of you that is a wounded part of you. The fact that your dad left at 12 and this thing was 12 inside of you, this part is very telling, right? I did not see that coming. Interesting. Secondly, what's interesting is that part of you is very young. So it's employing strategies. I mean, do you want your life to be led by a 12-year-old?
No.
No. But I guarantee you that 12-year-old is at the wheel a lot of the time. Right? Like running the show, like helping you make decisions, right? What's really interesting is it thinks you're still 12 years old. It doesn't know that you are a fully grown man now that can take care of it. It no longer needs to take care of you. That 12-year-old part gave you a strategy as a little person to survive the pain of life. And it's still working as if no time has passed. Like, parts don't have any sense of time, right? Like, and so that authentic expression of who you are, who was having a conversation with it, let's talk about who that is. That is your essential self. That is the you, that is 50-year-old Larry right there, right? Like a fully grown, mature, hopefully man, right? That now your parts, and that's just one of many parts inside. We could have talked to your inner critic. We could have talked to your all kinds of parts. That part needs to know, oh, wait a minute. Larry's a full-grown dude now. And as you befriend it, it will start to become more and more confident that you will do a good job of leading the show now. And you can actually, over time, when you do this kind of parts work, you can actually say to that part, you don't have to be this for me anymore. What new job would you like? You know what I mean? Like, it's like all of a sudden, it's not the driving achiever performer that's making you work around the clock, right? It's like, because chances are that part of you is really tired. It has been doing that a long time. And it is ready to let go of that job. It just needs to know that you will take care of things before it gives it up. That you will be in the seat of leadership inside your life. So that's just a couple of observations based on a 90-second exercise with you, right? Like, where are you at now with what just happened?
I feel really speechless. Tremendous clarity, and yet almost like this, just sort of observing something that it's like I'm fighting for that 12-year-old to stay.
This is really rich stuff. So what I would say to you is that's stuff to work with in your life, right? Like, it's very possible there's a part of you that is like, I don't want this guy to go away. And then that's a part of you can have a conversation with. The part of you that doesn't want it to go away. The part of you that's scared if it goes away. So, again, this is the journey of self-discovery and moving toward greater self-awareness and letting go of things. In my tradition, there's an idea that's important, which is when you were a child, you did childish things. And now that you're an adult, you can let those go now. That's what we're doing. We're just learning to say, oh, and by the way, to have empathy and compassion for that 12-year-old part of yourself that may be trying to be successful to prove to his dad that he's worthwhile. And it just helps you get your needs met. But now it's not serving you very well anymore.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This was really surprising and really, really revealing. And I got to be honest with you, man, I can't thank you enough. I'm guessing this is just a snippet of your book about rediscovering you, correct?
Yeah, it's called The Road Back to You.
The Road Back to You, yeah. And where I'm guessing you probably take people through something similar like this, right?
Not so much this, because that would get into other waters that I wasn't using when I wrote that book. But it would give them insights into, their particular personality style and how it shows up for the world and the difference that it makes in their lives, and become just self-aware people, just knowledgeable about who they are. Socrates, I think it was Socrates, right? Self-knowledge is the beginning of wisdom. And without it, you're just, I hate to say it, but I'll put it bluntly. The people I know in my life who lack self-awareness, my impression of them is they're knuckleheads. They're just knuckleheads.
I could see that.
You know what I mean? And they do and you know what knuckleheads do? Knucklehead stuff.
Knucklehead stuff.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They have multiple marriages. They They hurt their kids. They don't do it on purpose. They're just going through life asleep, and when you're asleep at the wheel, you hit stuff,
Yeah.
And, you know, um, yeah, so I can't recommend it more highly.
Well, this was very awakening for me, even though we just did a snippet of it. I want to point the audience in the direction of your resources page in particular, because you have a couple different. You have team building with Enneagram, you have being your most productive with Enneagram, and even understanding stress through your Enneagram type.
Yes. So if you go to Ian, IAN, Morgan, MorganCron.com, Ian Morgan Cron, I have an Enneagram assessment on there that I'm very proud of because we took 2 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to create a psychologically valid, scientifically validated test. It's not one of these stupid little quizzes you find about the Enneagram, they're all so misleading because they're just not real instruments. They're just people wanting your email and telling you stuff that's not true, or highly unlikely that it's true because it's just not a good instrument, right? All my books are on there. Coaching resources are on there. My podcast, Typology, we just this year crossed 30 million downloads. So it's a podcast about the Enneagram where I interview different types. And yeah, there's a ton of resources all on there.
Outstanding. We're going to have all those links in the show notes for you guys. We'll have Ian's social media handles, his website. Obviously, this resource page is huge, and obviously a list of his books. If you guys go to thedadedge.com/1410 for this show. Ian, this was really incredible. And personally, I just want to thank you for just taking me through that really authentic exercise. That was really revealing. And it was really, really helpful at the same time. I've never done anything like that. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for being willing to do it with me. That was very vulnerable.
One thing I do like being on this show is the guinea pig. So I'm always up for that. So
good. Well done.
But thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
You bet. Gentlemen, like I said, head on over to thedadedge.com/1410. We'll have all of Ian's resources in there for you. Go check him out. Go take your Enneagram test. Obviously, it is something that helps us get to know ourselves better, both the good and the bad. And we can always be more self-aware, and we can tweak the things that we need to work on. So from my heart to yours, gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in again today. Go out, live legendary. Take care.